Well, statistically, I think just given the population of Waikiki, the concentration of the population, I think some people would say there is more crime in Waikiki, but I think if you look in certain communities elsewhere throughout the island and throughout the state, you would have high levels of crime as well. But I'm not aware of the specific statistics by community. Like I don't know, Wahiawa versus Nanakuli versus Waikiki. I just know Waikiki is known for having crime. And recently we've had sort of a rise in the level of crime. Yeah, I think it's different places. I mean, obviously it's on Kalakaua, but it's also around commercial businesses. So it depends upon the business where it's at. It doesn't have to be on one street, it's many streets in Waikiki. Yeah, so it didn't come from City Council. It wasn't a council initiative. It actually came, it was an effort of the administration, the mayor's office, I believe, working with Honolulu Police Department and the community. So the Waikiki Business Improvement District Association and the Waikiki Neighborhood Board, they've expressed concerns with crime in Waikiki. And somehow together that group came together and they had either the cameras or the money for the cameras donated. And then they decided to install 40 more cameras. There's already cameras in Waikiki. There's many kinds of cameras. I mean, there's private cameras that the store owners have. There's traffic cameras. There's a camera on statues. I think people before they come to Waikiki, they look at the ocean conditions by looking at Duke's statue. So we have cameras in many places, but this was an additional 40 cameras added to deter criminal activity. Yeah, I don't know that they're special. I just know that the belief must be by those that decided to do this. Like I said, it was not a council initiative. But those that decided to install more cameras, the belief was that the presence of the cameras would deter criminal activity, because if someone was going to commit a crime, like let's say unfortunately someone goes to Waikiki with the intent of stealing a purse off a woman's shoulder or a backpack off a man's back, if they know that we have a series of cameras on our streets that have the ability to pick up criminal activity in public places, not in private places, but in public places, the belief is that it might deter that kind of activity. And then if the activity happens, I think there's some belief that they can use the cameras to go back and see, exactly what happened. And that was last year when we had the stabbing in Waikiki. They used the cameras to actually locate the knife. And maybe that was, I think it was last year or a year before, but they had a stabbing, and they were able to use the camera to locate the weapon and actually see what happened, how the attack happened. Because the body cam, the body cam policy is a new policy. In fact, they're still purchasing the cameras for the officers. But I think what we've seen nationally where those cameras have been implemented already, that they serve a two-way purpose. Many times they end up showing that an officer's conduct might not have been appropriate in a certain situation. So it's not always, I don't think it's appropriate to always look at it from the viewpoint of law enforcement, because they capture everything. They capture good law enforcement, they capture bad law enforcement, they capture good activity, and they capture bad activity. So it's sort of just a objective, neutral record of what's happening. The key to us and the concern for us is that the system only be as broad as it needs to be. In other words, you don't want to be capturing private activity, because when somebody has an expectation of privacy, then we have no constitutional right to capture that data. So for these cameras in Waikiki, the important thing is that the way they're installed and what they capture needs to be public and not private. And that is something we have to worry about, because we have hotel rooms and condominiums that are on the street, and you don't want those cameras to be recording somebody's activity through their window. That's private activity. So we always try to balance between the rights of the individuals and privacy rights and due process and all those things that go along with your constitutional rights against the right to surveil people in public to deter crimes. So City Council doesn't implement the program. In the city government, the executive branch, the administration, they implement and execute. So they're the branch that will install these cameras through one of their departments. And I don't know whether that's the Department of Facility Maintenance or Department of Transportation Services, because it's on street lights or street poles, I don't know. But it has to be a concern when you install these cameras that you don't overreach, right? So I think the proof is after they're installed. After they're installed, there should be an assessment as to whether or not you're capturing data that you don't have the legal right to capture. And if you are, you have to find a way to not do that, because you can't do that. I mean, we're still getting information regarding how those cameras are going to be installed and how that's going to work, and that's information that we're very much interested in. But right now, City Council doesn't know that. We'll be asking those questions. I know when I was at the Department of Transportation Services and we had the traffic cameras, they were live cameras and you could see live, but you were unable to go back and capture recordings from 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago. We didn't keep that kind of data. There's cameras on the city buses, inside and outside, you know. So, and I think that data is recorded for a period of time in the event they have an assault on the bus and they want to be able to go back and investigate what happened if a driver gets assaulted or two passengers get in a fight. So there's cameras everywhere, but for the new ones that are going in Waikiki, we don't know yet what the plan is. I tend to think it's just, I just don't know. I mean, I need to find out. If you don't overreach and invade the privacy of individuals and their expectations of privacy, then I think it can have a positive effect. We don't want to have crime anywhere. I mean, not just Waikiki. We don't want to have crime anywhere. We don't want to have people stabbed and purses stolen and businesses broken into. But at the same time, I worry about the expectation of privacy that people have. I'll give you an example. For example, let's say there's a clinic of some sort, a public clinic of some sort that provides, you know, pregnancy counseling or STD counseling or things of that nature. It may be in a public setting that the sidewalk leads to that clinic, but do we want to be monitoring people that go there? I think people have an expectation that they can go certain places and it not be monitored as to where they go. So I think it's important that we balance the need to protect the community from crime against the rights of the individuals. And so there's many things we need to look at. I know I can tell you on our traffic cameras, I don't know if you've ever been online to look at the traffic cameras, but there's a lot of them. And you can go between them. And I can tell you that at the Traffic Management Center, the engineers, the traffic engineers are able to go between the cameras and monitor them all the time. But there are so many cameras, you don't have one person watching one camera at any one time. And they're focused only on traffic. They're not looking at the pedestrians that are standing on the corners, but it actually will capture pedestrians and people on the sidewalk sometimes, but they're not interested in that. And we don't have anything in the traffic management system that collects data as far as facial features and is identification type software. So we don't do that on the traffic cameras. The one system that we had that raised issues with the public, state and city, was the camera on the freeways that was recording cars and it would record the car by the license plate. And the purpose of that was to be able to tell how fast the traffic was moving, because if you capture that license plate at this point via a bridge, and then you capture it at this point via a later bridge, you know the time it took for that license plate to get from A to B. Well, the people didn't want their license plates tracked, because then you're tracking the movement of people, right? And so that software specifically would encrypt the license plate, and then once it identified it at a later date, it would be encrypted as well, and then it would dispose of it. So it's like it makes use of the license plate for the purpose of calculating speed, but then it disposes of the data so that you're not able to track. So, you know, that's where we try to balance the need for information about the speed of our freeways and the congestion with the rights of people to not be tracked as they move about. But I know there are groups like the ACLU that always voices concern when they believe that constitutional rights are being breached, right? So there are groups like that. But in this case, with those cameras that were gifted to the city, I haven't heard any concerns yet. I haven't received any emails or any telephone calls or anything. The whole purpose is to make sure that criminal activity does not deter tourists or affect locals who are in a tourist area. I mean, it's about the economy of the state and keeping our reputation for safety intact, and Waikiki is a very safe tourist destination, but we want to keep it that way. But at its most meaningful level, it's about deterring criminal activity, period, because whether you're a local getting mugged or you're a tourist getting mugged, we don't want muggings, right? Oh, I don't know what the time frame is. I mean, I just, for the implementation side, for when they're going to be installed and what type of data is going to be recorded, if any, you have to get that from the city administration. We recently had a request for surveillance cameras, which they called security cameras, at the Alawai Boat Harbor. And that was, once again, to deter crime and protect people against crime. And I'll tell you that a long time ago, when I was at the Department of Transportation Services, we were looking at a parking meter that was able to detect the presence of a car by a camera. And they use these on the mainland. So the camera is on the back side of the parking meter, and it detects when a car is there so that it can monitor the time. And when the car leaves, then it would reset so that the next car couldn't come in and take advantage of someone else's pay. And we decided not to implement those types of parking meters because the cameras recorded information that were not for the purpose of the meter, right? So when there's no car there, if somebody just stopped and was like pushing a baby and talking with a friend, it would record them as well. And so anytime you have a camera, the objective has got to be that the purpose of that camera, if it's surveillance to deter crime, it's limited to that purpose and it's not broader than that. And so for what these cameras are going to do, who's watching them, whether they're recording, we really need to get that information from the administration side. I just think it's very important that government, and the city is government, that government always think through and be careful that when you install cameras in a public place, that you're not overreaching and you're not getting into private activity, private places, protected activity. And if you can strike that balance and protect the public through the use of surveillance cameras but not breach private rights, I think it's a good thing.